This story begins in a moment of profound loneliness, where a Chinese girl, bearing the pain of abandonment, feels like she has nothing left to lose. Bald, not beautiful, and rejected by society, she is merely a silent figure in a world full of scornful gazes. But then, one day, an unexpected change occurs when she decides to try on an old wigga thing that seemed to have no value. Yet, as soon as she wears it, the world around her suddenly changes. Eyes that once seemed to ignore her now stop, admire, and praise her. But does this change truly bring her happiness? Or is it just a superficial layer that obscures what she really wants from life? We will journey with her from a weak girl, abandoned by society, to the moment she finds true strength within herself. Are you ready to explore this touching story? In a peaceful small town, where glances pass by like indifferent winds, there lived a girl named May, lost in the dark days of loneliness. She was not seen as beautiful in others' eyes, and the truth was, she never received kind glances or compliments. Not because she didn't try, but because this world, with its harsh standards, never welcomed a bald girl with deep wrinkles etched in the memory of a life full of suffering. Hair, a symbol of beauty and allure for women everywhere, served as a constant reminder to May of the things she couldn't change. In the quiet moments of the night, when she looked into the mirror alone, the reflection seemed to mock her. No one saw her. She was like a shadow lost among many. However, at that very moment, May's life suddenly changed when she found an old Idema wig. It was not what she had expected, but it was the only thing that could help her change her appearance in the eyes of the world. This wig wasn't the luxurious, beautiful type most women longed for, but it was an old item, worn by time. But for May, it was her only chance to try again, to live, even if just for once, as a normal person. Could this be the key to open a new door, or just a mask to hide the painful truth? That question was not only about the wig, but also about herself, her self-awareness, and her true value as a person. Those around May always looked at her through the lens of judgment. They saw her as an imperfect image, a character in a story they never wanted to participate in. Not once did they offer a hand to help her when she faced difficulty. This world taught May one important lesson: that beauty can only exist within the mold set by society, and when you don't meet those standards, you no longer have a place in this world. Because of this, May couldn't find an escape, a foundation, even when she was exhausted. It was an indescribable loneliness, as if she were a forgotten shadow in her own life. And then, when the old wig was placed on her head, May suddenly realized that there were things she had never considered. When she looked into the mirror again, the reflection no longer showed a weak, dull, and lonely girl. She saw a different image, a girl with life, with a strength she hadn't noticed before. The wig, though imperfect, brought a completely different appearance and a newfound confidence. People looked at her, and for the first time in her life, she felt their gaze, no longer filled with contempt or avoidance, but with admiration and praise. But was this truly a change for May? When she donned an external beauty, did she truly find her self-worth? Or was it just a lie she created, seeking acceptance from those around her? This is the complex relationship that every person in modern society must face, a struggle between societal acceptance and maintaining personal integrity, between seeking others' admiration and loving oneself. One thing I have always believed is that changes from the outside can bring a temporary sense of joy, but only when we accept ourselves and love ourselves can we find lasting change. May's story is not about a girl transforming into someone else, but about a journey to realize that, whether she wears the wig or not, she is still herself, and her true value lies not in her appearance, but in what she can contribute to this world. May didn't need to change to deserve love, but sometimes we do need a little change to realize our true value. This is a lesson each of us must learn. Don't let external standards or society's judgment control your life and happiness. Because, as May realized, true beauty comes from within, and strength and confidence are things no one can take away from us, even in our weakest moments. One ordinary morning, like any other morning, May woke up in her small room with weak light filtering through the window. The feeling of loneliness still weighed heavily on her shoulders, even though every day she had to force herself to face it. In that room, everything was simple and worn out, just like her life, nothing special, nothing remarkable. But it was precisely in these seemingly peaceful and quiet moments that May's life began to shift, a change that she didn't expect. She stepped out of her room and saw the old wig lying on the table, the same one her mother had once used. It wasn't beautiful, not as elegant as the wigs other women owned, but for May, it was the only thing that could help her escape the shadow of loneliness and shame. She stared at the wig for a long time, feeling the cold emanating from it, like a distant memory she had once longed for but never had. It was a part of her past she wanted to keep, not because it was beautiful or valuable, but because it was the only thing that could help ease the pain in her heart. May didn't know why she decided to wear the wig. She only knew that, in these moments, it seemed like something that could help her temporarily forget her lack of affection, her lack of acceptance. She felt a little anxious, a little nervous, but also full of hope. Hope that by changing her appearance just a bit, people would see her differently. Hope that, no longer the bald May, people would see her as someone valuable, someone worthy of love and respect. When May wore the wig, she looked in the mirror again. It was a completely different image. The long, glossy black hair didn't hide the insecurities in her heart, but it created an illusion that she could be someone else, someone society could see and love. That feeling, though brief, sparked a bit of confidence in her heart that she had never felt before. For a moment, May no longer saw herself as the abandoned girl. She felt the change in her own gaze, as if a door had opened. A new world was waiting for her. However, as she stepped outside, she encountered different glances from familiar people. This time, there were no cold looks, no whispers behind her back. Instead, there was surprise, even admiration. People passing by no longer just stared at her bald head, but began looking at her face, her posture, and some even greeted her warmly. May couldn't help but feel surprised, as she had never been treated like this before. Those glances seemed to acknowledge her existence, to recognize the value she had never known before. But after feeling that change, May began to feel an indescribable emptiness. She couldn't understand why an old wig could change everything she had gone through. Yes, people saw her differently, but was this the real May? Were those admiring looks true acceptance, or just a superficial admiration, a fleeting change that she couldn't hold on to? The feeling came quickly, leading May to think complex thoughts. She started wondering if she would need to wear the wig every day to be accepted, to be loved. Could beauty really be something so easily altered? Did she have to become someone else, a perfect image in the eyes of others, to find true love? These questions kept circling in May's mind, making her feel more and more lost in this change. Here, I'd like to share my personal view, which is that changing our appearance just to seek acceptance from others can bring temporary feelings of satisfaction, but that satisfaction is not lasting. We can't spend our lives as masks, changing with every glance, every compliment from others. The change May underwent, though it might have brought her admiration and attention, also made her realize something important. Beauty isn't something we can change every day to please others. True beauty comes when we find ourselves, when we love and accept ourselves, no matter what we look like. May's story is a reminder to us all that there is no perfect beauty that lasts forever. True acceptance comes from how we perceive ourselves, not from the shallow glances of others. Because only when we love ourselves, no matter what form we take, can we find true happiness? The next day, May woke up with an indescribable feeling in her heart. It wasn't fear or anxiety, but a vague, hard-to-define emotion. She stepped outside and looked in the mirror once again, not to check the wig, but to search for answers to the questions that had been lingering in her mind all night. She still couldn't understand why everything had changed so quickly. The wig was simply an old item, nothing special, but it had turned her into someone else, at least in the eyes of others. That feeling lingered in her heart, part small joy, part fear that she couldn't shake. As May walked down the familiar street, everything seemed to have changed. The people who had previously passed her by without a word now looked at her with different eyes. They no longer just saw her bald head. Now, their gazes lingered longer, as if they were trying to understand something new, something interesting about her. There were women who looked at her with surprise, not because of her beauty, but because of the change in her appearance, in the way she walked, in how she suddenly no longer felt self-conscious under their gaze. They didn't say anything, but those looks were enough for May to feel like she had become an important part of their world, even if just for a brief moment. That sense of surprise continued to grow when May walked into a small shop nearby. She had never been treated like this before. She was no longer the abandoned, weak girl hiding in the corners of society, but a woman with value, someone whom others could stop and greet. The shop attendant smiled at her, a genuine smile, not because they were trying to work or because they needed to make a sale, but because they truly saw her, truly recognized the change in her. May felt a fresh breeze enter her, as if she had just stepped into a world she never thought she could belong to. But as she stepped out of the store, that vague feeling returned. May paused for a moment, looking at the wig in her hand, and wondering, is this really me? Or is this just a shell I'm using to hide my true self? That question was not easy to answer. All her life, May had thought of herself as unworthy of love, unworthy of attention, and that loneliness was inevitable in her life. But now, seeing the change in people's attitudes toward her, she felt an indescribable emptiness, feeling that maybe she was deceiving herself. She couldn't deny that the wig had helped her receive different looks. People no longer saw her as the bald girl, not beautiful, not accepted. Now, they saw someone new. But did those looks really reflect love and respect? Or were they just superficial admiration for the new image she had created? May didn't know. But one thing was certain. She was beginning to feel a shift within herself. She no longer felt invisible. She felt like someone who could make an impact, even if it was small. And that, even if it was an illusion, gave her a happiness she had never experienced before. Yet, inside May, there was still doubt. She wondered if she could maintain this image forever. If one day she no longer wore the wig, would people still care about her? Could she live in this world without changing herself? That was a question May still couldn't answer. However, in the days that followed, she began to realize something important. External changes don't always bring lasting satisfaction or happiness. The beauty people see may be due to external changes, but true beauty comes from self-acceptance and loving oneself. In the days that followed, May began to gradually realize that the beauty she was seeking wasn't something that could change according to others' judgments. She began to reconnect with herself, with the true values she carried in her heart. The wig, though it gave her more confidence, wasn't what determined her self-worth. She realized that true beauty didn't lie in whether she had beautiful hair, but in how she lived, in how she faced the challenges and difficulties life threw at her. My personal perspective on this issue is that we often seek acceptance from others, and we easily place our value on external standards. But I believe that once we truly love ourselves, we will realize that our value doesn't depend on what others think of us. Changing ourselves to fit external expectations may bring temporary benefits, but true happiness comes when we accept and love ourselves without needing to please anyone else. May have worn the wig, but in the end, she realized that nothing is more important than love and acceptance from herself. Time passed, and the self-confidence May had gained from the wig seemed to extend beyond just the outward change. She began to feel that society, those around her, no longer saw her as invisible. Every step she took, even if just small ones on the familiar path, no longer felt like silent, unnoticed steps. Instead, May felt like she was part of the community, an important part in the eyes of people who she had once thought would never notice her. The glances, the nods, the smiles from strangers who had once brushed past her with disdain now became acknowledgement. May felt a new wind blowing into her life, a feeling she had never thought she would have, attention. But it was at this moment that these changes led to an inner conflict within May. As she walked through the town, passing by streets she had once walked down with thick self-doubt in her heart, now all the eyes followed her. And not just by chance, people looked at her, talked to her, joked with her, and some even invited her to lunch. May couldn't help but feel surprised, even confused, by all that was happening. She had once been invisible in the eyes of everyone, and now she suddenly became the center of attention. This made her feel strange, and even a bit afraid. How could she maintain this forever? Would these people still care about her if one day she stopped wearing the wig? This wasn't just an insecurity about societal changes, but also an insecurity about herself. As May began to realize that everything she had, a very bit of attention and affection she was receiving, was due to her external change, the wig, she began to feel deceived. She couldn't help but wonder whether she truly deserved all this admiration, or if the wig had just created a perfect version of her that didn't reflect her true essence. May began to feel like she was living in a play, with herself playing a role, and the people around her were the audience, just waiting for a mistake to expose her. One afternoon, as she was walking down a familiar street, May happened to run into an old friend, someone she had once shared lonely moments with in the past. This friend looked at her in a different way, not with the indifference or rejection she had received before, but with surprise, mixed with a hint of doubt. The friend began to ask May about the change in her, about the wig, about what had made her become someone completely different in everyone's eyes. May was tired of these questions, but she couldn't avoid answering. "Do you feel happier?" the friend asked. May paused for a moment, then replied, "Yes, but I don't know if I can keep this up." That answer wasn't just a casual response, but a deep concern within May's heart. She couldn't deny that the wig wasn't what made her happy, but the acceptance the wig brought. But that made May feel uneasy. She wondered, if one day she no longer wanted to wear the wig, would these people still look at her with admiration? May gradually realized that the things on the outside were just temporary shells, and when those shells disappeared, what remained was her true self, what she had deep inside her soul. This situation made me think about an issue that many of us face in today's society. We often seek acceptance and love from others, and sometimes we lose ourselves in that journey. The truth is, once we live for the expectations of others, once we seek love based solely on our external appearance, we lose the essence of who we really are. I believe that external changes can only bring us temporary feelings, but to live a truly happy and fulfilling life, we must accept and love ourselves, no matter how many times we change. May is no exception in this story. When she wore the wig, she changed in ways she couldn't have anticipated, but it was when she faced herself, when she confronted the truth about herself and what she was truly seeking, that she began to realize that happiness didn't come from the admiration of others, but from self-acceptance. She realized that nothing is permanent, and the wig was just an exterior, something that could change. But her self-worth, her essence, couldn't be changed by external factors. True happiness comes from within, from knowing who you are and accepting yourself in any circumstance. My perspective here is, we cannot live forever, in the falsehood of external appearances. Whether you wear wigs or do anything to be accepted, happiness only truly comes when you accept yourself, when you understand that your value isn't in what others think of you, but in what you have inside your heart and soul. Only then can you be free and live your life truly. One day, as the final light of the day began to fade and the sky turned a warm orange, May stood at a crossroads in her life. The feeling of unease, the internal conflict between the temporary beauty the wig brought and the insecurity still burned in her heart. Every step May took now carried with it a fear that if the wig were removed, would she still hold the attention and affection of those around her? Just as the thoughts May had long held within her heart began to surface, she felt like she was standing before an important choice, not just whether she should continue wearing the wig, but a decision between living for the acceptance of society or living true to herself. That day, May was invited to a large party in town. It was an important occasion where people from all walks of life gathered to socialize, chat, and showcase their relationships. May knew this was her chance to be seen differently, as no one in this town would remember her as the bald girl they once avoided. They would see her as someone perfect, a living proof that change was possible, that she could become beautiful. She felt proud of herself, and the wig felt like her ticket to enter this world, into the society where before she had been a ghost. However, when she entered the party, everything was not as she had imagined. People did not just look at her with the admiring gazes she had once anticipated. Instead, they looked at her as if she were a part of them, a part of the society that had once rejected her. But when May looked deeper into their eyes, she felt an emptiness in her heart. They didn't see her. They only saw what she was wearing. The compliments weren't for the true May, but for the outer shell she had created. May couldn't help but feel deceived by the admiration she was receiving. She had once thought the wig would help her gain true acceptance, but now she realized that it was merely a temporary image, a display of vanity with nothing truly lasting. In her confusion, May stepped outside into the garden, where the moonlight gently illuminated everything. She stood there for a long time, looking at her reflection in the mirror. At that moment, she no longer saw a beautiful girl in the wig. She saw a woman struggling with the changes within herself. She wondered whether she had to live in this facade for the rest of her life, or whether she could break free from this falsehood and rediscover who she truly was. That question swirled in her mind, hard to answer. Then, in that moment, as May was deep in thought, a man walked up to her. It was Cyrus, a man she had met in the past, someone who had once made her feel abandoned, someone May never thought she would receive help from. They stood face to face, and in the quiet space of the late night, May felt a strange connection. Cyrus didn't speak right away. He just looked at her, and then gently said, "You don't need to change to be beautiful. You are already you, and that is enough." Those words, though simple, struck May's mind like a powerful blow. She looked at Cyrus, not understanding how his eyes could carry such deep understanding. At that moment, May began to realize that the wig was not what gave her value. In fact, it was just a cover, a way to hide the fears and insecurities she had buried deep within herself for so many years. She had used it as a mask to face the world, to seek acceptance from others, but in doing so, she had forgotten about herself. The admiring glances she received from others weren't real love. They were admiration for an image she had created. This made May feel like she was left alone in the shell she had made for herself. Cyrus didn't say anything more. He just stood there, looking at her like a friend, not judging, not trying to change her. His presence and those words made May begin to realize something important. Love and self-worth don't come from pleasing others, but from accepting and loving oneself. She realized that whether she wore the wig or not, she was still May and still had value, just like everyone else. This story makes me think a lot about the societal standards we often face. Each of us has wounds, pains that not everyone understands. And sometimes we use external layers to hide those hurts, to make ourselves feel safer in society. But is that the only way to live? Can we be happy living just to please others? My view is that when we focus too much on what others think of us, we lose ourselves. True happiness and value don't come from the gazes of others or compliments from the outside. They come from loving and accepting ourselves, no matter what we look like. May was not an exception in this story. When she wore the wig, she changed in ways she couldn't have predicted. But it was when she faced herself, when she confronted the truth about herself and what she was truly seeking, that she began to realize that happiness doesn't come from admiration from others, but from self-acceptance. She realized that nothing is permanent, and the wig was just an exterior, something that could change, but her self-worth, her essence, couldn't be changed by external factors. True happiness comes from within, from knowing who you are and accepting yourself in any circumstance. My perspective here is, we can't live forever in the falsehood of external appearances. Whether you wear wigs or do anything to be accepted, happiness only truly comes when you accept yourself, when you understand that your value isn't in what others think of you, but in what you have inside your heart and soul. Only then can you be free and live your life truly. The next day, May decided to do what she hadn't dared to do for a long time: take off the wig and step outside. She didn't know what would happen, but she was ready. She walked out of the house, down the road that used to make her feel lost and alone, but now it felt like a road to freedom. May no longer felt fear when she looked into the eyes of those around her. The people passing by no longer saw her as a stranger or a shadow. They saw a real person, someone of value, without having to try too hard to change herself. And strangely enough, as May walked by, she noticed that the gazes of the people hadn't changed. No one stopped to compliment her or admire her beauty anymore. Instead, they looked at her with friendly eyes, eyes full of respect that May had never received before. These people didn't look at her for the wig or her external features. They looked at her because of who she truly was. This was a moment May would never forget, as she realized that true love and acceptance from others didn't depend on what you wore or how you looked. It came from the person you were inside. May stopped by a cafe, a place she used to sit alone for hours, reflecting on her life, thinking about everything she had gone through. Today, when she walked into the cafe, no one looked at her with pity or judgment. Everyone just saw her as a regular customer. This feeling was magical. It was as if May had finally been welcomed into a world she had missed for so long. In that moment, she realized something important. True beauty isn't something you can create with an exterior layer. It comes from the confidence and peace within. The biggest change May underwent wasn't in her outward appearance, but in the way she saw herself. Yes, the wig may have helped her feel confident temporarily, but only when she truly loved herself, when she didn't need to pretend to be someone else, did she begin to live fully as who she really was. And that was what May had been searching for all this time. May's story reminds me of an important truth that not everyone realizes. We live in a society where external appearances are often prioritized. People are always obsessed with perfect images, with the mold society has set for us. And many times, we lose ourselves trying to fit into those molds. But in reality, true beauty only comes when you no longer feel the need to change yourself to please others. When you love yourself, you no longer need any masks, because you understand that your value doesn't depend on the judgment of others. I believe no one can live a complete life if they are only living for others. Yes, society will always set standards, but ultimately, we must learn to rise above them and live a life we can be proud of. May found peace within herself, and she realized that nothing was more beautiful than being loved for who she truly was. That is the freedom that very few of us can feel. When you are no longer afraid, no longer trying to change for others, you will find true happiness. May no longer lives for the acceptance of others. She has learned that love from the outside is only temporary, and only self-love is enduring. As she walks through life, no longer needing to wear the wig or change herself to fit the standards around her, May has found tranquility in her soul. She knows that, no matter what she does, she is still worthy of love and respect, not for her appearance, but for who she truly is. This change in May is a powerful message to all of us. Don't let external factors determine your value. Love yourself. Live in the way that feels right for you. Because in the end, self-acceptance and self-love are the most important things. This story isn't just May Sits a reminder to all of us who have struggled with societal beauty standards. To those who are searching for acceptance from others, while forgetting that the most important thing is the love we give ourselves. After years of living in the shadow of insecurity and judgment from others, May has finally found herself. She no longer needs to change to become someone else, and she no longer needs to wear the wig to be loved. May realizes that happiness doesn't lie in pleasing the gazes from outside, but in knowing how to appreciate herself, no matter what form or circumstances she may be in. True beauty is not in what others see, but in the peace we feel inside when we live authentically. She is no longer afraid. She no longer feels lost in this world. As she walks, May no longer hears whispers or sees curious glances. Instead, she feels peace and freedom. She starts smiling at herself every day, not because others look at her and praise her, but because she has learned to love herself. She doesn't need to chase society's standards to feel valued. That value has always been within her. She just hadn't realized it. May has returned to her normal life, but this time, she no longer feels alone. The people around her, instead of seeing her as a stranger, treat her with respect and affection. They look at her as a regular person, someone they can share joy and sorrow with. Most importantly, May realizes that she doesn't need to change herself to fit others' expectations because she has created a life that she is proud of. And May's story isn't just her own. It's a reminder to all of us, those of us who sometimes get lost in the search for societal acceptance and forget to love and accept ourselves. This story is an encouragement to those who are living in the shadow of insecurity, that you can completely change your life, not by pleasing others, but by starting to love yourself. So, how do you feel after following May's journey? Have you ever experienced the anxiety of needing to change to be accepted? Share your thoughts in the comments below the video. Have you ever faced challenges similar to May's and found a way to love yourself? May's story is a reminder that each of us has value, no matter who we are, and we deserve to be loved for our true selves. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like and share it to spread this message to those around you. Subscribe to the channel so you won't miss inspiring stories and life lessons. And remember, no matter what, you are worthy of love just as you are.